Hello, and welcome to Right to Be Wrong, the show that revives the art of conversation, accommodating varied views on sports, culture, politics, world events, and every topic under the sun. After all, you have a right to be wrong. Here are your hosts, Dave and Tony.
Tone, it's that time of the week again where I'm going to put my opinions in you. And this week, I think we should discuss, or you should be lectured about, as it seems to be, and remember, don't go over your 25%. Should earnings be capped?
I'm going to say this once, Dave, and I'm not going to say it again. We negotiated 26.5% of actual time, but more importantly, 42% of the words that are spoken on the podcast.
Have you been counting words?
Yes, I'm a word counter.
Are you at 40? Well, I suppose you count things.
That's right.
What you do.
That's what I do.
So have you been getting your 42% of words?
I've been getting actually last week was only 38.5%, despite your promises that you were going to try and restrain yourself. You just couldn't help yourself.
Are big words counted as like 2 words?
How do you manage to carry that soapbox everywhere?
I don't know. It's heavy. I've been doing it for so long. It's actually funny because obviously I have to listen back for quality control, and the Mauritian Queen listens and gives her feedback, which, by the way, there's been none for months and months, so that's good. But I do sit back sometimes and go, I know a lot of crap. I know a lot of good stuff. I'm so full of opinions. I wonder why I've never been attracted to politics. I think I don't have that final element, which is I can't bullshit. Like I can bullshit for fun, but I can't bullshit deliberately to take people down the garden path.
I'm hearing you. You're going to talk too straight. So, Dave, what are we speaking about tonight?
Well, what we're going to talk about is whether or not people make too much money effectively. This came up in a conversation I had with someone at a barbershop. And they said they were talking about Elon Musk, and they were railing against Elon Musk and sort of his supposed outside influence on things. And he sort of said no one person should have that much money anyway. And it got me thinking, like in essence, that's a true statement, right? It makes sense, especially in an era where inequality in Western society is becoming larger. But then I thought, well, if you create something and it has unlimited earning potential, should you be able to earn as much as you can from your creation? And B, if the answer to that is no, what level would you cap it at? And how would you cap it? And how would you police that capping?
So this is the issue for me, Dave. I get it. I hear it. But again, we've spoken in the past around problems come up in the economy, society, and then people look to government to solve the problem for them. Right? So this is a classic where we're talking about, and I've used in my research, I've put a couple of examples out there saying, should corporate earnings be capped? And then should the earnings of high-profile players in high-profile sports be capped? Should that also be capped? Just to get an idea of some of the pros, cons, whatever. Now, anything that's going to involve government coming in to what I would largely say is a free market or a market to regulate what people can earn, I really struggle with. Even though what CEOs are earning at the moment is obscene, if there is governance around how CEOs are remunerated, if CEOs are remunerated based on achieving KPIs that the board have said are important for the shareholders to get whatever value they want to get out of that company, and they're meeting those KPIs, and it's a ridiculous, hugely offensive sum of money, it is what it is. Can they afford it? Are they willing to pay it? Now, if you want to have a discussion around whether I believe they're actually worth that amount of money, and could someone actually create that amount of value to recoup that investment in a CEO, then it's a different discussion. But if companies approve it, shareholders endorse it because they actually endorse director and I think executive remuneration, then for me, it's fair game.
Well, I picked up 4 things there. The first thing is I'm surprised that you researched for the podcast. Number 1, I'm impressed. I don't. I just talk shit.
I'm a unicorn.
You are prepared. Number 2, you used a big word there, remuneration. So that counts as 2 words towards your word count.
Remuneration.
Yeah. If you go and do that, you can hit your 42% in the first 15 minutes. I'm sorry, Tone. And then you can just listen for the next 40. The third thing and the serious thing I'd say is I agree that in a free market, attempting to cap someone's earnings is a not necessarily dangerous thing to do, but it is fraught with all sorts of pitfalls.
Oh,
Having said that, I think like everything in life, the system you create is never going to cover off everything 100%. So there's always going to be an exception to the rule. So in that regard, let's start with the CEO remuneration. And you're correct. If the board's going to endorse it, the shareholders are going to endorse it, well, effectively, that's all it requires in that situation, right? Because they're the ones with the skin in the game. Now, having said that, I think in recent years, we've seen some CEOs around the world, Alan Joyce, where they've been able to make a company look good by effectively hollowing out the company, not replacing plant and equipment, so to speak, sacking people that's found to be illegal, so on and so forth, that you can make yourself look like the CEO extraordinaire by increasing margins by really just not making sure you take care of the regular costs of running that business. Now, having said that, that's also a responsibility for a board and for shareholders. If you're that foolish that you can't see that when it's happening in real time, you've got to wait until your company falls in its reputation and global rankings within the industry, a la Qantas. Well, to me, that's what you get as a shareholder that's just looking at the short-term spike in the equities price. Now, having said that, I think the exception to the rule in this, because I've been thinking actually quite deeply about it, because it's one of those questions that comes up where I've not thought about it a lot before, not had a lot of experience. I thought there is a time and a place where I think governments can and should step in relation to earnings, but I don't believe it's from the facet of the earnings itself. So let's use Google as an example. So the two guys that started Google out of nothing, and Google becomes what it is, and they've got to be worth trillions. I probably should have done a year on research and looked up exactly, but the point is, yeah, they've made an incredible amount of money. And I would probably say at this point that something like Google has morphed from being a private business into a utility. Because every time a search engine, you're searching for something, we like to think there's been other players in the market, but really it's Google. So the only way I could see a justification for capping wouldn't be a capping of the earnings of the person that started it or a capping of the earnings of the CEO as far as it being a private business. But at the point where you need to say this has become something that's a utility. So this is water, electricity, rail, roads. So for me, there are two standout things I would call utilities that I'd probably be looking at in that space. I've just mentioned Google, and the other would probably be, the internet, in general. You'd turn around and you'd put that there. But I think those sorts of things, potentially X, potentially Facebook. But if you get to a point where something, through its own successes, becomes effectively a monopoly and that people have no alternative outside of that than to use it, and it's not being used as an option, it's a necessity in daily life, I think you're starting to get into the preconditions of a utility.
So, Dave, we've now got a utility in our hands. Let's go with the Google example. What do we do here? I've got an idea. Google pays tax, yeah?
Allegedly.
So instead of paying tax across some jurisdictions, which are probably really difficult to find out where the ultimate tax is born. But anyway, let's just assume there's some level of tax paid to a government somewhere. But back in the US, where its head office is, what are we saying? That if that asset, which is in private hands, has become a utility, you want to actually cap, or you want some level of control over that utility to the extent that it influences everyone's life so much. So for me, that would look and smell like the government stepping in and over a period of time, taking equity positions to help control or to build up enough shares in that company to be able to influence some level of control. So then that opens up Pandora's box.
It does,
because
but
we're saying
I wouldn't take an equity share. You'd have to nationalise it.
And that's okay. So now we've got governments who are already in the Western world completely inundated by debt, right? Taking on further debt because they're not going to find cost savings somewhere else to help fund the 20% acquisition of Google, are they? Right?
No.
More than likely, it's going to be debt that funds it, and they're hoping that the money that they get back out of that 20%, right, that they've invested in through dividends, capital growth, would help offset the investment that they made. All well and good. But then I've got an issue because we're borrowing more money to nationalise a utility, and I'm thinking to myself, hang on, couldn't we spend that? If we're going to borrow money to fix stuff, shouldn't we be fixing housing or education or hospitals?
Now, I agree, but I didn't say that it should be a priority.
Yeah.
I would say it'd be something that you would do once you've got your house back in order, right? So you're correct. So once you're...
Say it again, Dave.
You're correct.
Say it again.
You are correct. It's a little bit like the font saying, I was wrong. It's a bit like you are correct. I would say that what we need to do in the first instance is get our own house in order, right? So fix our higher education system, as we've done a whole episode on fixing higher ed. Get your tradesmen up and running, have a proper migration policy, update and maintain your existing infrastructure. And at the point that your economy is running well again, that would be the time in which you'd want to do something like nationalizing something such as Google. And for people that think, oh, why would you do that? You shouldn't do it. Well, the first railways became nationalized and the first electricity.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is a normal thing when you have certain businesses that arise that become literally the railway of modern life, and then it's beyond private ownership. Because what happens is you do get this. So, for example, if we stay on the path we're at with, say, Google, using Google, and every time a company comes up big enough with AI that they've got the money to buy it out and no one else does, they can literally just continue to control, all the things of life. And you're starting to see that happen, right? Because you're getting into Google Pay.
Yeah.
Right? So Google was a search engine. Now you've got a pay option. Let alone how many other things does Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, how many other things are Alphabet starting to buy up? You see it with Meta, right? With Facebook. So someone came up with WhatsApp. So Facebook buys WhatsApp. Now, I'm not saying that businesses shouldn't be allowed to acquire other businesses, but there's a big difference between, say, for example, WhatsApp. You can text message, you can use Telegram. There are all sorts of other means of communication you have. You're not sort of stuck on it's WhatsApp or it's nothing. But when was the last time anyone did a search with any search engine outside of Google? Being honest, everyone that's listening to this, when was the last time you used DuckDuckGo?
Netscape?
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about here. We're at the point, and this is what it starts to do too, is it becomes part of modern vernacular, right? So when you're looking up something, searching something,
I Googled it.
You Google it, right? Now there's a case in law in regard to Hoover that because the term went from vacuuming, you're vacuuming the house, people started to say, I've got a Hoover, I'm hoovering the house. So this was more a US thing. It became they went to court over the use of the term Hoover because they said that's our brand, that's what we own, it's our IP. And it was effectively established that it became a modern term, and once that happens, that in modern parlance, in everyday conversation, you no longer own the right to that. It just became everything. So you'd start to think that in some ways, when everyone says you're looking up something, looking for something, researching something, you're Googling it, we're starting to move into that territory.
So how do we move? So I'm thinking, Dave, I'm anti-market intervention. I don't believe practically it'd be difficult to justify, especially in the US, right, where a lot of these companies that you've spoken about are US-based. I cannot see a Democrat or a Republican administration ever justifying nationalisation. Mind you, the current administration did chuck some money into that large language model company, NVIDIA.
Yeah,
it invested quite a sum of money in them. So maybe there is a potential there. So in the absence of...
Is that a begrudging admission that the Trump administration has done something positive?
No, I don't agree with what they've done, but it's opened the door. It's shown me that governments will do it. Now here, I don't believe the Trump administration has actually done that for some greater good or greater social utility. I think they've done it because I think they can make money out of it and give them a kick along.
Well, the governments have done a lot of public-private partnerships anyway. This is not a new thing.
know, but
We've done a lot of it with roads. Our universities are sort of run like Australia Post is run like that.
Yeah.
It's the government's a single shareholder though.
Yeah, they're a statutory corp.
Yeah. So there are precedents for doing this sort of thing.
But I think it's on a scale, Dave. If you look at the market capitalization of some of these companies, it's at a scale where governments just don't have the capacity to raise the debt that would be required to even partially nationalize some of these companies. So I say to myself, so what are the practical steps you could take then to help mitigate CEO pay, right, in a realistic way that potentially gives more people a voice at the table? So is there external scrutiny of, you would think the shareholders should do this, but external scrutiny of the KPIs that CEOs are gunning for and making sure that they're actually linked to performance and outcomes?
Well, I think in days gone by, there was probably more scrutiny when there was less retail investor. So, for example, I can pick up my phone now, and I've traded on CMC markets, right? So there are people like me that are, you're not the old school stockbroker and everyone doing the same due diligence that once happened. Now, I do a little bit of due diligence. I do read a bit more. I have a little bit more understanding. But there's a lot of people now that the gamification that they called of trading, where you can open an app and it looks so much like a game and people can buy and sell on a hunch. I think part of that means that there's more narrative and momentum that get into certain companies than there is due diligence around what are the metrics that are being set for this company to grow at the pace that the CEO is projecting and whatever it may be. So in that regard, this is where I'll defend the organizations that it's not up to them, that, in a world full of gamification of investing and people wanting to just buy and sell so quickly on a whim or on a meme, it's up to the individual, the old caveat emptor, buyer beware. So I think in that regard, when we talk about capping earnings, there's multiple things under that term that you got to be careful of. The first, obviously, we've laid out that some things are out of control. Everyone knows that. We've touched on nationalising, which we'll continue on because it's a deep conversation. But I don't want to also absolve people from their own individual accountability and responsibility, because at the end of the day, if you're a shareholder in these companies, taking Google, and you think, and this is old data, this is from 3 or 4 years back, so it might have been one good year or it might be even worse, but Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, was $400 million that year. Now, I find it very hard to say that someone that's just holding the wheel of a car that someone else has built can make an argument that they're worth that sort of money. As I've laid out, if it was $400 million made by Sergey Brin and Mental Block and the other guy, but if they made it each, you go, well, they're the ones that started it. But this is someone that's just come along. You've just got the C in front of your name, and you're just holding the steering wheel of the car. Like, how are you justifying your $400 million?
But isn't that just a function of the market that they're in?
Well,
what I mean is, to get what they perceive to be top talent at the CEO level, as offensive as that number is, and mind you, I would also note that Facebook at the moment are snaffling engineers from other places, like software engineers, for head of product development roles, and they're getting $200 million a year, right? So the board's gone crazy in terms of these numbers. But if that's a function of the market for that particular role, then shouldn't it just play out? If they can afford it and they're happy to pay it and they feel like they're going to get value, then I say let them go for it. My only caveat, as always, is, and this is what really rubs me up the wrong way, let's just say, Dave, in 3 years' time, right, there's some disruptor or some market capitulation that specifically hits all these massive tech companies, right? Share prices fall through the floor, layoffs galore, redundancies, debt covenants broken, everything gone to shit. What would happen?
Well, nothing, but there should be accountability on the...
I know what I mean. So what would happen is they'd be knocking on the door of the White House going,
for a
can you
bailout.
bail us out?
Yep.
Right.
Too big to fail,
That's
or
right.
too big to jail, as someone once said.
And that's my only caveat on all this stuff, that I'm happy for the free market to do what the free market does. Governance around executive and director remuneration, disclosure around that, shareholder votes, all of that stuff. Fantastic. Great. You want to pay it. You reckon you're going to get value. Good on you. But if it all goes to shit, do not come running and looking for taxpayer to bail you out, because we shouldn't have done it in the GFC, right? And we shouldn't have been handing out money to every Tom, Dick and Harry during COVID.
I agree. But and your position on CEO remuneration, because you've said this in a previous episode, that CEO searches are global searches now.
Yeah.
They are. Now, I don't think they should be, because I still think people that can, if you're talking about a CEO, for example, banking, finance, you go to the US market, you bring someone to Australia, yes. But if you're talking about, I've seen CEOs that they're jumping industries, I don't see how someone can have no experience in the industry other than, I'm at the executive level, so I can come in and I can do this. But leave that aside for now. If you're talking about a global market that you're paying big dollars to attract the best, because let's use a sports analogy.
Or
right?
you can use a recent banking analogy with ANZ.
Well, you can, but let's look at it from I'll use a sports analogy because you see where I'm going.
Sure.
Your team's at the bottom of the ladder, so this could be the NBA, which your team might be at the bottom of the ladder because your team was throwing games. But anyway, you're at the bottom of the EPL, you're at the bottom of F1, whatever sport you follow, you're at the bottom. And you turn around and you identify the top 3 coaches in your league, and you're going to go hard. You're going to throw so much money at them, because you believe that coach is not only a great coach at getting the best out of players, but his talent identification, his junior development. And you think that this is not about us. We're just one piece short. And here, if we buy the coach, we get the point guard we need. If we buy the coach, we get the driver we need. If we buy the coach, we get the striker we need. Like you're nowhere, right? You pay the big dollars. You have a 5 to 10 year plan with this master coach. He gets your pathways right, gives the right juniors your opportunities, polishes the edges off them, goes into the market and buys the right players here and there that you don't have the juniors coming through. All of a sudden, you're on top of the league. You win, right? Money well spent, assuming that you haven't overpaid.
Yeah, sure.
What competitor is there to Google, right? So I've just said there's no competitor to Google. So using that scenario, let's use the NFL, right? Your team is led by Tom Brady, and assume that aside from the fact that he took his teams to Super Bowls anyway, let's imagine that the players through that roster are all the best in their position anyway. No one else is beating you. Tom's just led you to the 15th Super Bowl in a row.
Mm.
Why are you going into the market to pay overs for a coach? So you're Google. You have no competitor. Why are you going into the market and paying overs for your CEO? If anything, you're Google. You turn around and say, you want this on your CV? You want this amazing organization? We will teach you things when you've never seen an organization like Google. You should be able to get someone in for $50 million, right? So for me, that's what I find the issue in this CEO search now is it's no longer getting the best to address our issues. This argument is made in industries where the largest players are monopoly, duopoly, or at worst, oligopolies, which means there's only going to be 5 or 6 CEOs at best in your industry. So why are you paying over? All it is then is it's because we can. It's ego. We're the best. So one thing when I worked at the University of Sydney, the University of Sydney's EBA, Enterprise Bargaining Agreement for our non-Australian listeners, they prided themselves at every level. They paid more than every other university in Australia. Now, it might be, say, by a band of $5,000, but the point was they always wanted to make sure they paid more than others. So I can get it, right? They play on the fact that we're supposedly the best, therefore we pay the best, and therefore we attract the best. So using that example, I can understand why Google might pay a little bit more to get you at Google than Facebook.
Yep.
Or Google than X or wherever it may be. But as we've laid out, there's a very limited number of players in the market. So why are you paying extraordinary amount of money? Because again, using that same analogy, going back to Tom Brady, you turn around and Tom Brady retires after 15 seasons, but every single position is covered. Are you going into the market to pay huge amounts of money for the best? Or you turn around and go, no.
Yeah.
For everything those guys, the plays are running, all we need is someone who just hits his marks.
Yeah.
That's it.
But the NFL's slightly different to the extent that there's a salary cap, which doesn't allow you to have the best players in every position.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I'm just using it so people understand that that's the position Google's in. Google's in a non-salary cap era with the best player in every position, whether you're talking about AC Milan, whether you're talking about
right. So there is
Patriots, whoever, the Yankees. Your team is currently full of the best that's available. Why are you paying overs?
It is ego, right?
It's definitely ego.
But then that ego responds to what the market's paying, right? Do you reckon the guy running Google wants to be earning 50% less than the bloke running Facebook?
No, of course not. But it becomes an arms race, right? So if people don't do it, Facebook's not paying overs either. And this is half the reason of salary caps. And this is something you pointed out when we did our NRL 20 team competition. I spoke about the points-based system rather than the salary cap. And you made a really good point that you said half the reason for a salary cap
is to save them from themselves.
That's
right.
Yeah. So it's that sort of thing that, if one stops doing it and says, well, no worries, off you go, because what are you going to do? There's already a CEO at Google. You think you're going to turf him. So do you want this job or you don't want it?
Oh, no. So one thing, Dave, I wouldn't mind spending a bit of time delving into. It's not a weave or a pivot. It's more of a bit of a deep dive. Can we do a deep dive?
We can deep dive, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
It's something new. I've not done a deep dive before.
Increasingly, people will try and link the fact that the huge disparity between average earnings of a CEO and the average earnings of the average worker in that same company, or across industry, whatever, the number's getting bigger. So, for example, the CEO earns 200 times the average salary of the guy on the factory floor, whatever it might be. Could be 500, could be 600. So they link that to this increasing income inequality, right? And I actually believe there absolutely is an increasing income inequality, but I don't think it's because CEOs are getting paid $400 million. Right? I think it's much deeper than that, but people throw the income inequality one or outcome as something we could go and attack CEOs for being overpaid. But if you really want to, because it's a cheap bite, it's a cheap click, it's cheap political point scoring. But if you want to delve into and go deep dive on income inequality and the widening gap between haves and have-nots, it's more than just CEOs getting paid too much.
100%. That's one variable in about 3,712 variables. But even having said that, this is something that Jordan Peterson once said, and I saw him in I won't call it a Q&A. He was sort of being attacked when he was pointing out how far we've come globally. He was talking about, global improvement. So there are obviously some countries, better and worse. But one of the things he actually pointed out is he said, well, how much inequality is actually acceptable? And what he meant was, let's say, in China, there was a billion people that were on the poverty line. So let's call it $1 a day. And let's say the top companies in China were, the top executives in China are making $1,000 a day, right? So it's 1,000 to 1. If you said that you could grow the Chinese economy to the point where the living standard was the average Chinese was making the equivalent of $1,000 a day, then on that same ratio, being 1,000 to 1, that's making it that they're on $1 million a day. And it's like, well, would you accept them making $2 million a day, but they've dragged that person from $1 a day to 1,000? So he said, even though the inequality is getting larger, and this is not a defense of the inequality, but there's a bit more to it. It's like if you've dragged people out of poverty and they've got a roof over their head and they can afford a middle income car and they can send their kids to good schools, and they've got good access to health. As a result of that person that was able to come up with the system, the idea, whatever it is to take you there, do you then begrudge them because the inequality is now worse than what it was before if you're using that metric, but their lives are 1,000 times better than what it was?
I heard a similar argument today, listening to another podcast.
Don't listen to other podcasts. That's cheating.
I listened to.
Actually, I'd listen to other podcasts.
And the point was the globalization as an outcome gets the shit kicked out of it, right? It's caused all these problems, right? But if you look at globalization in a lot of ways has lifted a whole lot of people out of that dollar a day.
It's which people.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I thought it was a really good point. And this was from someone who ran a large listed company in the US and saw the hollowing out of manufacturing in the US off to China. And it's raised and by the time they realized what China was building, it was too late. And now they've far more advanced, right? But
would this be the CEO of Ford?
No, it was the CEO of a company called Dow Chemical.
Right.
And he's an Australian guy born in Darwin of Greek migrants who ended up running Dow Chemical. Fantastic. Listen.
Because I was reading something from the CEO of Ford last week, who came back from a tour of China, and he's like shocked in both an amazed, wow, how good, and a holy crap, we need to get our shit together.
That's right.
Or we're done.
And the solution isn't necessarily, let's bring back all this manufacturing stuff, right? There is part of that.
Yeah. There's part of it, but it's not all of it. The trouble with it is this. On paper, you could say, let's call it, what do you reckon? Let's be really high and say 50 million people in the US have been affected by the hollowing out of their manufacturing base, right? It's probably not that high. It's probably not 1 in 6, 1 in 7, but we'll run with it for this hypothesis. So 50 million people in the US are now worse off, but 500 million people are now better off in China, right? So on face value, you go, well,
net
10 times more people are living a better life.
In the world.
The trouble is that the responsibility of a US president and US government is for his family, because that would be like me saying, well, my family now suffers and the other family's doing better off. My responsibility is not to that family. So this is where the problem is. The issue is not about taking people out of agrarian subsistence farming and improving their quality of life. The issue is that these American companies used us as the consumers to take our money, but our jobs disappeared.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So was that a pivot or a weave?
It's a peeve.
It's a peeve.
It's a pet peeve.
Now, Dave, I want to talk about something because people get so, and you hear it a lot in Australia, politicians get paid too much, CEOs get paid too much, they're not doing real work, there's no value in what they create, these all these tall poppies. Is part of this the tall poppy syndrome, that we can't actually get our heads around that the fact is that the guy who runs CBA might earn 20, 25 million bucks. He's responsible for 40-odd thousand people. He's responsible for God knows how many businesses in terms of lending and operations and everything else. But he's up there, right? He's a target for us. So we're going to try and bring him down because that's what we do in Australia.
Well, we do have a bit of a problem with tall poppy, but I think politicians are not paid enough, and that's why we get shit. And I know a lot of people are out there who, I wish I got paid $220,000 plus. I get it. That's not what I mean. We pay a small amount of money and we get the dregs, to be honest. If you look at business and you look at politics, there's very few people in politics. They do exist, but there's very few people in politics that are sharp, really know what they're doing, care, take accountability and responsibility, and have vision. Politics doesn't attract them.
Yeah.
That means we end up with a lot of, we get a burgeoning bureaucracy and a bloated government. So we'd be better off with small government and well-paid people that know what they're doing. Singapore pays their prime minister, or I think it's a prime minister. They pay theirs like $5 million a year, and they have a small and efficient government that have great ideas. So I think our first mistake is we pay not enough, and that's why people are at CBA and BHP and all these other companies making 10x, 20x, 50x what the Prime Minister makes, and you don't even know their name. They don't have to be on the front page of a newspaper and half the country hates them. So I think we get what we pay for in that regard, the old adage, right? We pay peanuts and we've got monkeys.
Yep.
As far as the CEO remuneration, I think that's it. I think people, it's not necessarily a tall poppy syndrome. Like it's there. But I think it's more because what we're seeing is getting back to things I've mentioned multiple times. Things are going on that are legal and compliant, but they're not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So using banking as an example, yeah, it's great that you came up with these services, you increased margin, did whatever, but you lent to a little old lady that didn't have capacity to understand what she was signing. You lent too much money to people. The computer said yes, but you really know they're going to be struggling. You're pushing credit cards onto people as soon as they turn 18. They've got a pre-approved limit that's going to put people in a cycle of debt. So I think the CEOs cop a little bit more.
Back off, Dave. I got my fully franked dividend from CBA. Shut up.
So I think that's more the issue, right? And this gets back to earlier in the podcast where I mentioned about Alan Joyce, right? Alan Joyce took something that was once a national airline. The government of the day privatized it to take the money. The country no longer owns this airline, but we have pride in the flying kangaroo, and he gutted it, right? So I think some of the CEO stuff is not necessarily about what they earn, because if Alan Joyce made his $20 million and everyone went, can you believe how new the fleet is for Qantas? Can you know what? I've never lost a bag. I've been flying 30 years. Qantas run on time all the time. Guess what Qantas do? They serve me great food, and I don't have to hear them give me a welcome to country every time I land in my own country. Yeah, so this is, I think the CEO stuff is more that they've gone off the rails with not asking, is this the right thing to do? And particularly in recent years where in Western society, a lot of corporates have decided that they'll get themselves involved in social engineering. And that gets people's goat, because people know that, you're not necessarily the nicest, kindest people. Your staff are under pressure, everything's about the dollar, and then you want to lecture us about how we should live and what's morally right and wrong. So I think whilst people are, noticing the 50x CEO salary, I think there's a whole bunch of other things that piss them off that lead to, you get paid too much money for what you do. What are you producing?
Yeah, I agree. Another thing I want to touch on is they'll always say that high-performing CEOs, accountable, results-driven, they're rare. So for something rare, you need to pay for it, and you have to dip in potentially. So a country like Australia at times needs to dip into the global market to find the appropriate CEO to lead these big companies that we own. Like the recent appointment of the CEO of ANZ, who came from overseas, I'm not sure what they're paying. I'm sure it's a link to incentives, and I'm sure it's linked to something that the board's approved, so that's all fine. But I cannot believe that a company of 20,000 people, whatever it might be, with all that bureaucracy and all that structure and all those leadership development programs and all those accelerated programs to get
find their own internal CEO.
They develop all this infrastructure and overhead to help create talent, to help create the next EM and then EGM and then group executive, and they look across their talent maps and they do correlation and they do this, that, and the other, and they couldn't find a CEO to run that bank. Yeah. Right.
Which tells me you need to gut all that stuff then, because you've got no faith.
That's what I mean. And that to me rests with the board.
Yeah.
Because if you're saying that an Australian-based bank that's got an international presence, absolutely, ANZ potentially more so than other ones, had to go overseas to find their right CEO, part of me think that's just box ticking for them to say, we've undertaken a global search.
Well, I think there's a bit of a perception across a number of different industries that if you're not looking external, you're not getting the best. Because look at how, I love to bash higher education.
But for the record, Dave, I did look external at other podcasts.
You did look overseas, but you thought, you know what? If I'm going to get this many opinions, I need to be able to understand the accent. So you couldn't outsource it. Tony, their salary too high. Their salary too high, Tony. There's problem. There's big problem.
I apologise to all of our Asian listeners.
No, I don't. And that's not because I'm having a go at you. I love it when my Chinese friends actually make fun of when I speak Mandarin and how it sounds. So it's one of those things. So no apologies. You don't get apologies. You're allowed to just have a laugh at each other. But getting back to the CEO search, this is something in higher education, all the external consultants. I can literally remember when Deloitte's were coming to do an external audit of our processes in the misconduct space. And I said to the director, are you serious? I said, you're going to pay all that money? I said, you realize we've got a whole bunch of people who've been doing this for years. We can tell you what we need to improve. It's just you won't listen. But there's this sort of belief, once people are getting to, I would suggest around head directors positions and then GM and then C-suite, it's like, oh, if we don't go external, we're not getting the right eyes that can tell us what's happening.
No, we need a fresh look at this.
Yeah, it's like
we need someone without any baggage.
And you know what? Sometimes that perception of baggage is wrong, because people get that tagged with baggage because for years they've been telling you something's not working and here's how we can fix it. And you perceive it as, oh, all they're doing is complaining, so we'll go external. And you know what happens? They go external, and those people sit in meetings with people like me, because I was appointed to be the one that when they ask questions.
Basically on board.
And then feed back exactly what I've said's not working, but then you paid them $500,000. So it's, for me, some of this stuff, and one other thing, here's something for C-suite and all you supposed leaders out there that get upset when someone below you is feeding you information on what's not working. Which, two things, by the way, the term manage up, when people say you got to learn to manage up, you have to learn to manage up, Dave. Fuck no. If you're above me, why am I managing you? Right? You should be managing me. And what I mean by that is I should be looking up to you, that you have knowledge, skill set, and experience that you're going to develop in me. I'm the manager, or I'm the head, or I'm whatever. So I'm meant to be in the zone of proximal development, and you're developing me. If you have to manage up, the person above should be gone. So that's number one. Number two, the world does not improve off those that consent. So all the yes people around you that tell you you're wonderful and everything's going good and they won't say anything, they're not the people that drive things forward. We would still think the world was flat without the dissenters. It's the dissenters that drive things forward. You got to learn to listen. Now, they might be wrong sometimes. They might be a bull in the china shop, Dave. But you need to learn to listen, because that's how we actually move forward. So one of the things when I was actually teaching cross-cultural management at the University of Sydney was that there are cultures where one of the problems that they have in moving forward, so places like China, is because they have a high power distance, right? So one of the cultural dimensions, there was three main studies on culture. So by that, I don't mean Australian culture and Chinese culture, Saudi culture. So there's Lars Trompenaars, who originally, Gert Hofstede, Lars Trompenaars Globe Study. So cultural dimensions are things like individualism over collectivism. Things like a high power distance and a low power distance. So using power distance as an example, what that means is in Australia, a CEO of a company could walk into the office, see John the janitor and say, hey, John, how are you? See Sarah, the secretary, and say, hey, Sarah, how are the kids? How'd they go to soccer on weekend? Somewhere with a high power distance won't do that because they perceive themselves too high. What I say goes. So in China, for example, because they have a high power distance, it means that things that aren't working, no one will dare tell the people above that there's a problem. So we've seen this play out. There's a very famous, I think you should be able to find on YouTube, there's this very famous thing with a bus company that the CEO of the bus company goes out to show how good his drivers are, and they've got buckets of water placed and they've got witches' hats and the drivers move around everything and nothing spills. And then they give the CEO a go. And he drives around, things spill everywhere. And then they ask everyone, oh, how'd the boss go? Oh, he's the best. He's better than all of us. We could learn from him. There's water all over the floor. No one else spilled a drop. So if you're in a situation where you're creating a high power distance, that you're such a tyrant, even if you're not aware of it, that people aren't feeding up to your problem, again, you're not a leader. So, but unfortunately, a lot of the people that are getting paid hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of dollars, a lot of them are just really, they've learned to play the game. They're not really delivering anything that's outside the box. They're not necessarily driving the company forward. So I look at Sundar Pichai of Google and I say, okay, what did Google deliver when he took over? What do they deliver now? There's been no change. I didn't turn around and go, oh, they invented a whole new thing.
But at some point, some of these big companies run themselves, don't they?
100%.
No. Okay, I'll take part of that back.
No,
right?
for the most part.
But it does, leadership's going to be the difference. So all I would say is there needs to be, as I started the podcast, there needs to be what I call market accountability, right? Organizations, sporting organizations, government organizations, listed organizations, private organizations, they've got the authority within those organizations to make decisions to attract the best talent, to drive the best outcomes. And whether those outcomes are good, bad, or indifferent, it's with them.
And I would suggest that for me, and I know there's a bit more to being a CEO than this, but one of the number one things to me of being a CEO is what the first thing you said, attracting the best talent. And this is something I would argue Steve Jobs was a pretty good CEO. I think he led a company and he did all right. And Steve Jobs used to say, we don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they tell us what to do.
Absolutely.
Right? I think to me, that's the number one thing of a CEO.
Is that why you asked me to join the podcast?
It's 100% why I asked you. I thought, well, I'm full of opinions. They're not necessarily right. I need someone from C-suite that's actually intelligent and knows what he's talking about.
So I think for me, it's about that market accountability, but it's about the moral hazard piece. If it doesn't all go pear-shaped, then you wear it. And then to your earlier point around when companies are doing things that clearly aren't right, governments shouldn't kind of hover around the topic, right? They should just come out and slap them down, like the whole frequent flyer point stuff that I think Qantas did during COVID. No, the selling of seats that actually weren't available.
Yeah, there was a period there where I had, because in my last role I was flying 36 times a year. And there was this 2 or 3 week period there where every single flight that I had was getting cancelled. And now I found out later that Qantas were selling flights that didn't exist. That's why they were getting cancelled. And nothing happened.
That's what I mean. So for stuff like that, I think that's where governments and regulators need to come down harder.
Yep.
Right? Even, I can't actually remember how badly some of the banks were penalised or fined when they were selling dodgy products to pensioners like Storm Financial Group back in the day. But again, you come down hard because these people are paying high incentives to sell products that you know fundamentally are going to potentially ruin people's lives, and they get away with it relatively scot-free. That's where you've got to come down. And you've got to come down hard. Like, you've got to come down hard on boards, right? And then CEOs, because ultimately they're the decision makers and they're executing. And they've got to have some oversight of what's going on. And you've got to come down really hard to set examples so that when people are being offered $800,000 to sit on a listed board, they think, let me do some digging on this company to see exactly how it's operating.
And that's what I was going to say is that's probably one of the best mechanisms to try and control remuneration there might be, because what that then means, if you're seeing $400 million salaries, you can have faith that if things go awry because they've dropped the ball, that there's accountability. Because that's the flip side to that generosity.
Absolutely.
Right.
Because there should be, every time you're asked to join a board, there needs to be a level of concern where you say to yourself, what's the downside, right? What am I getting into? I like my house.
I'm actually, speaking of boards, there was a thing up on my LinkedIn today asking for alumni of Western Sydney University to join their board for the student union. Submit your expressions of interest. And I thought, I'd like to do it, but I can just imagine him going, he knows too much and the shit he says about the higher education sector on his podcast.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We can't have a guy that truly points out that, we've got 30% of people below an average IQ studying here. Yeah. That's not going to...
I know.
That's not going to work out well. Have you thought about that since I said it the other week, by the way?
Oh, the 50-50.
Like, when I said, 62% currently and they're aiming for 80%, what that actually
30%
means.
below the average IQ, below 50%, right?
Like, to me, this should be, taxpayers should be up in arms about this. This should be, alongside cost of living, this should be the second one going, not only have we got a cost of living crisis, but you're burning our money by doing that.
Yep.
I can't believe it's just flying under the radar. And am I taking crazy pills?
So, Dave, how are we going to wrap this one up? What are we saying? We're saying the market is what the market is, but there needs to be some capacity for governments to step in.
I think we need to let the market play out as is, but there's probably, we're heading to a period where some of our big things that are opposed to children of high CEO salaries are probably lending themselves to discussions around being utilities and not private businesses now anyway.
I know. And what I would say, Dave, is that all this talk around uncapped earnings and let the market do what the market does, that will absolutely apply to you and I in 3 years' time when we're describing ourselves as a social utility.
Yeah. It means that we've got to the point that we're the top 1%. I don't think we'll ever get to the top 1%. You're closer than I am, but
thanks,
if the
Bernie.
podcast takes off.
I know. Good chat, Dave. What do we say, mate?
You have a right to be wrong, Tony, and I'll fix the Australian economy. You just trust me, mate.
Thanks, Albo.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and we hope you enjoyed it. Like us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.